Imam Azhar, as Muslims living in West, are we actually facing any identity crisis in regards to, are we struggling between our Islamic identity versus trying to fit into American identity?
This is an interesting question that many people just brush over, not realize the intensity of this question. You have to dissect it. First of all, a mass majority of Muslims living in the West don't know where culture ends and where Islam begins, or vice versa. This is a fact. Most Muslims don't know that. And that's evident through how we celebrate our celebrations, conduct our ceremonies, and do the things that we do in our life. Our kids grow up assuming that this is our Islam, when in actuality has nothing to do with Islam. It's just a cultural practice. Now you take that cultural practice and you dissect that cultural practice, you'll find it has its roots in paganism and other things which are contrary to an Islamic identity. The Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, made it clear that whatever was good in the days of Jahiliyyah, of days of ignorance, is also acceptable in the days of Islam, so long it corresponds with the values. خِيَارُكُمْ فِي الْجَاهِلِيَّةِ خِيَارُكُمْ فِي الْإِسْلَامِ إِذَا فَقُهُ. If it corresponds with the value system, then it's fine. So are Muslims facing an identity crisis with their Islam in the West? Let's go back. They're facing an identity crisis between their faith and their culture. And then you add to the mix the Western culture, it becomes khichdi.
Little more complex.
It becomes very complex. And the way you could see this from a different angle is that there are people out there who seek meaning in life, right? They're out there looking through different religions and different ways of life. You'll see them with the Buddhists, you'll see them with the yogis, you'll see them with the Christians, and they'll be parading and learning everywhere they can learn. But then when they find Islam, they say, we found the truth, and this is who we want to be. Everyone's with me on this? This is who we want to be, right? We want to be this. Now, this is where it gets difficult. They come to a masjid, take the shahada, now they're learning. No, you have to be Pakistani Muslim, Bangladeshi Muslim, Arabian Muslim. And it becomes so complicated. Do I have to learn the language? Do I have to dress the dress? Do I have to eat the same food? So if you look at it from that angle, anyone who's coming from either side is being sucked into this vortex, which we cannot identify how detrimental it is. So yes,
so it's more confusing for them when they come into Islam.
It's confusing for
Islam plus culture. So that's kind of, it's more complicated. And then at some point they realize that it's still maybe too much for me.
Exactly. And that's sometimes the premise why so many leave. It's because they're like, I didn't sign up for this. So for them, it was finding Islam, drowning in culture. For the Muslims who are born Muslims, it's emerging from culture to understanding your Islam. It's only when you have an idea of who you are, can you understand what it is that's being presented to you to become. The Western culture is a culture.
Right.
It's not incumbent on us to follow it and adapt to it or adopt it. It's a choice in many ways in this country. However, when a person doesn't know who they are and there's no boundary set, they go off to the opposite side.
Is it the same reaction between the immigrant generation versus second or third generation who are already born and brought up here? So are the immigrant generation a little worse than the other generations, or vice versa?
I believe the first, second generation, not the immigrant generation,
right,
are more susceptible to being vulnerable. And that's because the parents who came from their countries had their set value system, and they didn't compromise it much. But what they did was they created obscurity around their children that tempted them to understand what's outside of this box. And so when opportunity presented itself, off they went.
Thank you so much. That's a little enlightening for me.